So, David, Jesus dies on a Friday afternoon, comes back to the dead from the dead Sunday morning, right? So that's how many hours?
40, 48. No, what would that be? So Friday afternoon, Saturday afternoon, that's 24. Yeah, 36 hours, right?
Okay, yeah, so it's not 48 hours, right? Or it's not 72 hours is what I'm saying. So it's definitely not, three 24-hour period days, but this is how the ancients counted. So if it began on one day, you count the whole day. Same thing with kingly rule. So king starts reigning in December of the year 5, and he dies January, year 7. So he really only reigns for, you know, 14 months. So we'd say about a year. But end of 5, so that's 1, all of 6, and beginning of 7. So we would say he reigned for 3 years. So same thing with Jesus, right? Dies on a Friday. So a whole day, well, not the whole day, but we count the whole day. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. That's why we say 3 days later. That's how the ancients counted. So your mother-in-law comes to stay with you on a Monday afternoon, and she leaves Friday morning. How many days did she stay with you?
I think she's been there for 5 days.
The answer is too many.
You go. All right. Hope she's
How was
listening.
how was that set up?
Yeah, that was good.
I've told
Could
I've
have
told
could
her
have
that
been
one
could have
before.
been yeah. I thought you were gonna say something about fish stinking. What is it? It's like companies like fish starts to stink after a few days.
Okay, so what I really want to talk to you about, so this is the next one. I really want to talk to you about the tetramorph. This I don't know what to call it, a figure, a morph, this form
Right.
with four different morphs, right? So you get this from Ezekiel and Revelation. So you've got the man, the lion, the ox, and the eagle. And I saw this on President Harrison's stole a couple years ago when he was preaching at our state pastors conference, and I was serving communion with him. And so I said to him, "Hey, I love the tetramorph on your stool." And he goes, "The what? I've never heard it called that before." And I was like, "Oh, you must not spend a whole lot of time on Wikipedia." So here's my analogy, and you're gonna hate this, and I'm gonna waste this on you, and that's fine. But somebody out there listening is gonna love this. So I was thinking about Christian denominations, and not in terms to the tetramorph, but in terms to the four teams and the NFC North of the NFL. Okay. So obviously, the Lutherans, we are the Vikings. We're lovable, never won a championship. We always fall short because of some hang up, call it the two kingdoms theology, where we just can't quite go there. We can't quite grasp it. Whatever. But we've got some major players that people love. Now they're pretty controversial. So we've got Randy Moss, that's Philip Melanchthon. And people love the Vikings. We've got great staff. I mean, like, would you rather be anywhere else? It's like it's not perfect. We haven't won the championship, but you think about all the bureaucracies in other places. Like we're okay. We're pretty well run. Like, we've got nice facilities. We've got the purple palace. The color's even purple. So you buy that the Lutherans are the Vikings, right?
I'm down with that.
Okay, cool. So now, who are we always comparing ourselves to?
So it's a little unclear to me because I've never been a Vikings fan, but it seems to me that it would have to be the Lions, right? It'd have to be the Lions or the Pack. I mean, no, okay.
No, 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 no.
Isn't the Packer Bear rivalry more fundamental than Vikings Packers?
Okay, yeah. So you're definitely, so you've got that right. Okay, but the Lions are irrelevant, and we'll get to them in a second. They're the Pentecostals. Okay, um, so Vikings compare themselves to the Packers. Like, that's the game. And as far as success goes in the last 30 years, it's like the Vikings and the Packers as far as win percentage. I mean, those are the two teams. So the Packers are the reformed. So this is who we love to compare ourselves to, right? Starting in the 16th century, it's all these debates about the Lord's Supper, about the efficacy of baptism. That's the Packers, and we hate them. We can't stand them. We're like, why would anybody ever like rooting for them? And people will leave the Vikings, the Lutherans, for really silly reasons. So, Joe Mensch, and I hate talking about him on the podcast because now he's going to think he's, hot stuff. He grew up a Vikings fan because he's from Hermantown, Minnesota. fact, his middle name is Luther, so his middle name is Viking, and that's not a joke. Okay, his middle name is Luther. Grows up rooting for the Vikings. Love boat incident happens in the early 2000s. Scandal. You got famous Vikings on this boat. Lots of inappropriate stuff going on. So his dad tells him, "We can't be Vikings fans anymore. We're hopping over to the Packers." So the analogy is people leave Lutheranism for really silly reasons, and they're like, so something serious happened. We'll grant that, right? It's like there's scandals in Lutheranism. We we know it's true, right? But then what happens is they end up jumping ship to a demonic team. I use the term demonic lightly. Like, I'm not calling the Reformed demonic. Okay, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But they hop teams and they end up denying the real presence because somebody in their congregation was a real schlub. You understand what I'm saying?
Okay. Okay. I think I'm following. So
Now, here's
okay.
the thing. Here's the thing about the Packers. So they've won. Like, they call themselves Titletown USA, and we, like, whenever Packers fans are like Super Bowl, like we're like, yeah, you're okay. I'm just whatever. Like, we struggle to find the words because they're right? They've got the Super Bowls. They've gone the distance. Like, they've had real political authority. They've got Geneva with Calvin. They've got the Netherlands with Abraham Kuyper. So there's not the holdup there. They're able to somehow get the crown. You see what I'm saying? And we've never had that. Now we've had a Gustavus Adolphus, but we don't know who that is. It's a college.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Now the Bears. That's the Catholics. Okay, because there's this other rivalry here too, and the Packers, they don't even want to talk about us. They're like, well, we kind of, we got to acknowledge the Vikings, the Lutherans, because they kind of, they kind of started this whole thing, or whatever. But we're gonna say we're the true church, and we're the younger brother, and the older shall serve the younger. So we can argue, but that's cute. But we're gonna say we're in contradiction to the Pope. So this is the Bears. But here's the thing about the Bears: like, they haven't been relevant since 1985, which is a long time. Um, they've got numbers, they've got fans because it's Chicago, but, like, honestly, like, who cares what's going on with the Bears? Who cares what's going on with the Pope? Now, I say that very well knowing when he goes to the hospital because the New York Times covers it, right? But it's like, you guys haven't been relevant for a while, and that's fine. And funny enough, the thing that's keeping me away from the Bears and Catholicism is Coach Mike Ditka, Bears coach,
Mm-hmm.
who was a Catholic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All right, you buying into this? You see, okay. And then next is
Yep,
the
I'm tracking.
Lions. So they've always been terrible. No sense of history at all. This is Pentecostalism, and we've seen it rise recently, right? And they've had lots of success in the regular season, but they've had injury problems. So the roster keeps changing over. So who's on the field? Always a different person. Just like the Pentecostal congregations, there's no retention of membership. It's just a constant flow, and there's always a hang up. They can't ever get to the championship game because there's no sense of history. What do you think of that?
Yeah, wasted on me, but hopefully somebody will enjoy it. I'm still stuck on the fact that I made such a blunder thinking that the rivalry was with the Lions. I don't know what I was thinking. I haven't thought seriously about football since 1997. Interesting. Let's see. Who are the evangelicals then? Who is the team that we wish we were like, to our great shame? We wish that we were glorious and spectacular the way they are, all the glitz and the glamour. Who are they?
Oh, easy. Kansas City Chiefs. And people either love them or they hate them, just like the evangelicals, right? And they've got all their celebrities. So they've got Taylor Swift, right? Justin
There you go.
Bieber. So I
Yeah.
this really this is really going far, and I can't wait to publish my book on it.
Yeah, it's got legs. That's a PhD right there. Good.
Yeah, from a European university, easy. Okay, if I mean I could get a demon tomorrow using that. Now, here's the real tetramorph I want to talk to you about. So you subscribe to Jerome's tetramorph, applying it to the four gospels, right?
I don't have any reason to discount it. Let's see. Work through with me how this lines up. I know John is the eagle because he kind of soars above
Because he
everything, has a
soars.
bird's eye view, right? And he's also got some concern for Rome, right? For the Romans, and so there's this like relationship to the eagle as the standard of Rome. You could do that. Let's see here. You've got a man, an ox, a bear, and an eagle, right? Yep. So Matthew is the man, right?
Yes,
And why is
because
that?
his gospel starts with the genealogy.
Okay. And I'm not going to be able to tell who's who, Mark or Luke, the ox or the bear. Help me out with that.
So not the bear, sorry,
Not the bear, the
lion.
lion. Yeah, right.
Yep. And Mark is the lion. I don't know Jerome's connections, but for me it's Jesus's temptation in Mark. He's the only it's an incredibly short temptation, right? It's like 2 verses in Mark 1. So we don't get what words were said. It's just a wordless battle. But the detail that Mark gives us is that he was 40 days in the wilderness with the beasts, so with the lions.
Okay.
So it's that little detail there. And then Luke then would be the ox. And the ox, one of the animals, it's sacrificed for the ordination of priests. And so you look at Luke, he is mentioning the temple all the time, especially in the beginning of the gospel, right? So Jesus is circumcised. He's presented at the temple 40 days after. That's where we get Anna and Simeon, the Noctamitis. A 12-year-old Jesus goes to the temple. So, and then, of course, even before that, John the Baptist's father, right? He's a priest serving in the temple. And then so it begins in the temple, and then it ends with the temple too, because after the ascension, the disciples returned to the temple praising God for what had happened.
Okay, so I can see some use in characterizing the Gospels, recognizing their unique personality. I think that's a valuable thing, or the unique contribution they bring. And maybe this is an unnecessary question, but I do struggle to get from, well, these are the creatures, these are the figures you see in Ezekiel, to therefore these are the characterizations of the gospel. So does that follow simply from the fact that there's a kind of reading and a kind of reading of the text that requires allegorical interpretation, and so and a tetramorph invites allegorization, and for Jerome and others, this is kind of the best option. Is that all there is to it?
Yeah, I think so. So what are the 3 classical ways of reading the text? Do you remember their basic names?
No, I don't. There's literal, right? There's the literal meaning of the words.
Right. Yep. And then there's the anagogical, right? And it's been a long time. We didn't even have to take a hermeneutics class. So this is I could do a Google search real quick. But the point is there are layers to reading the Bible. This is how the fathers read it, and we shouldn't be scared of it. So just because we're going to read something allegorically, that doesn't mean we're going to read it as if it's not true. Because Paul does this, right? He mentions the word allegory in Galatians to refer to Sarah and Hagar. And if Paul does it, that means, hey, this is a valid way of reading the Bible. And this is what we can't stand with the rectilinear. It's like, yeah, they get what's before their eyes, and that might be necessary at a time in the 70s where it's like people are denying that Jonah and the fish really happened. So our first move is going to be, well, we got to declare that it really happened. That's true, but if we stop there, we're missing the ocean. Like we got the surface level, but we're missing all of the fish underneath.
Right. And maybe there's a challenge, a mystery, right? So when Paul talks about the child of the slave woman and the child of the free woman, that's not something that I don't think you can intuit from Genesis, that this is going to be an allegorical interpretation. I don't think you can just read that at face value. But what Paul does is in some sense what we end up doing as preachers very often, is that we use the narratives, the history, and say, see here how this applies. So, for instance, I make a ton of hay out of Naaman the Syrian, for all kinds of reasons, right? He did in fact have leprosy, and he did in fact get cleansed in the Jordan River and resist, and so on and so forth. But it's really useful to see how human nature scoffs at the confounding simplicity of God's instructions, or his use of means, of lowly means, in order to save people, and so on and so forth, right? So there's a way in which that allegory, I know that, so I get nervous because I know these words have technical meanings that are maybe not necessarily accurate to how we're using them, but like there's an allegorical application of that text that is instructive, it's useful. So when you read Reinhard Pieper's homiletics, and it seems like the Lutheran homileticians preferred the fivefold use of Scripture from, what is it? It's from 2 Timothy and from
Romans 16, right?
Right. Yeah. So that fivefold use of Scripture, did Reinhold Pieper say anything about the use of allegory in preaching?
I can't recall if he did or not. But he did say, when you're structuring your sermon, you have a couple different options which he thinks are valid. You can just kind of go through the text verse by verse, such as what we see with like Luther sermons in American edition, which is very useful. We think of that more like Bible study, but I think we could do that. Or he says you could also come up with your own theme, and then you got a couple options there with the theme. So what you can do is you can take the whole text and then subdivide it and make it fit your theme, and that works. Or what you can do, like what you do for the second Sunday of Epiphany, right? John chapter 2, wedding at Cana. You preach on marriage, right? You still do that.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. Now, is the point of John chapter 2, the wedding at Cana, is the main point of that text to teach us about how to live in our marriages? I would say that's not the main point, right? The main point is that he manifested his glory, right? Because that's how the text ends. But it certainly is a point. So Jesus is giving us an example here. So that's not an allegorical reading, but you could see where it goes hand, like it's tangential. So it's a totally valid thing to preach on.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe the one peculiar or distinctive kind of interpretation, which would be to say, here's a thing that is only allegorical, and that doesn't seem to be anything that's like that, right? Where there's a text that is purely allegory, like Milton's Paradise, or John Donne, what's it? Not Paradise Lost, but Pilgrim's Progress, right? So here's a text that is only allegorical, right? Does the Bible contain any of those texts?
Some of the parables that Jesus tells.
Okay, but they're set in history, right? So they're set in the mouth of a historical man who's delivering them, right?
Right, but it is interesting that like he tells these kind of allegorical stories where, so the parable of the workers in the vineyard, the wicked tenants, right? That's clearly an allegory, because even and the people listening to that, the high priests, they knew it was them that he was allegorizing.
Okay, what is there a difference between allegory and analogy? Or are they basically the same thing?
I mean, I'm sure there's a technical difference. I mean, so an allegory means there's a one-for-one comparison, right? So they both deal with comparing things, where an analogy, well, as a figure of speech, right, you're using the word like or as. So then it's like, then you throw in metaphor too. So I think they were just dealing with different realms of speech.
Yeah, yeah, and so the point of like understanding a text like Ezekiel and the introduction to these creatures is that there is something non-figurative going on. He actually saw these creatures, but then there is something figurative about them. They are figures for something else.
Right, right. And we should do a deep dive on the Tetramorph sometime, that like too, saying like what would all the applications be? Because I don't think it's only exclusively referring to the four gospels. So what else could it refer to? But I really like it because I think it's a useful teaching tool, just thinking about the gospels and their personalities. So
Right, right.
even if that's not what Ezekiel directly means by it, it does not violate the analogy of faith. So there you go. There's analogy.
Yeah, that's good. I was thinking about that just recently too, about how there are things that emerge from that you can pull out of Scripture that are not necessary but useful, and so it fits. And that's very Pauline, like you said. I mean, this is what Paul willingly does. Luther does it all the time too. By the by, just gladly makes use of Scripture to teach in whatever way suits him.
Yeah. So which gospel is your favorite?
At present, I really enjoy Mark, and I like it because it is so it's so self-contained and of manageable proportions for the new reader of the Gospels. So I love it as a teaching tool. So my most recent kind of approach to catechesis, to new member instruction, is a chapter of Mark a week until we're done, and sometimes taking more than 1 week, depending on how much there is to talk about. And it's also, the drop in media res, no birth narrative, no Christmas story. We're going to get to the kingdom of God right away. And the kingdom of God is manifested in the forgiveness of sins, in the waters of baptism, out of which Jesus is driven promptly. He's like 20 verses in, and we're in the wilderness doing battle with the devil. So what I love about it is that it sets the stage immediately for what Jesus is about. You can't, like, the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, Mark says. So there's no room for, I'm not really sure what's going on here. Maybe we'll have to see what happens at the end. No, here's what's going on. And then everything that follows, from the miracles to the parables to the instruction about life, not cleaning the outside of the cup, but being clean on the inside. All of that fits within that really well contained introduction. So I love it for that reason. I think it's great as far as instruction goes. I think that it's a little bit more difficult when you get to 24 or 28 chapters, or certainly with John. I know Luther's like, you should read John first, but I find that John is difficult to understand, and needs more time. He needs more. You got to kind of soak yourself in John a little bit more. Yeah. What's your take?
Well, so answer me this, dealing with Mark. So the beginning, and actually there's no article there. Now with titles, there doesn't need to be, but there is kind of a debate of whether it's the beginning or a beginning. And then the question is, what is that a reference to? Is that the title for the entire book? Which I like that view. It's the whole book is the beginning of the gospel of Jesus Christ, because then you go to the end of the book and it's like Jesus ascends into heaven. And I know we could talk about the ending of Mark, but with the added ending there, it says that Jesus continued to work through the apostles' hands, right? And then that's a nice segue into Acts. So it's like this is the beginning, but now the gospel is still playing out like in us, right? Because Jesus lives in us and is still working through us. But how do you take the title that way, or do you think it's just like the first 8 verses, or
No, I think
what?
it makes most sense as a title, as an introduction, because the action begins right away after that sentence, right? John was at the Jordan River. But I don't know. It feels to me like quibbles about articles are a peculiarly English thing. Like it doesn't actually matter in some sense,
The Jehovah's Witnesses would be happy to hear you say that.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. A beginning. I mean, I think here. So here you go. I mean, I think it's nice. I think that plays well. I think that what you just did by describing the beginning, or what is a beginning and then a continuance at the end of the gospel, that's great. Do it.
What really strikes me is that how all 4 gospels begin in a similar way. So Matthew begins with the Genesis. So we read the English word, it's genealogy, but the Greek word is Genesis. So you're starting at where? At the beginning. Mark, the beginning. Luke, you got this beautiful Septuagintal style Greek describing, like, in as far as much ways as possible, O Theophilus, right? He goes, and does he use the word the beginning? I gotta look here again. I know of course, Theophilus. Yeah, compile a thing. Now, so Luke is great because if you skip that intro there, he begins where the people would begin, and that's the beginning of civilization. Especially in Luke 2, which would be Rome. So it's like all roads end at Rome, but they also kind of begin there. And then, of course, John, and I'll let you get to Luke, but John, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. So they all start with the arche, right? The source, and of course we know that's Christ Himself.
Yeah, that gets to some of the philosophical conversation we've had lately. That there really are these fundamental questions, and the fundamental questions about the origin of all things. Right? It's what everyone wonders at some point. Where did I come from? Why am I here? Where did all of this come from? Where is it going? And here are the gospel writers really not in, it seems to me at least, playing a philosophical game, but answering that question about the beginning, the beginning of all things, right?
Right. And so here's the question: are they using philosophical terms? So when John uses the term logos, is he borrowing that from Plato, or is what he's saying is, I'm going to use this term that Plato used, but I'm going to show you how it even predates Plato? It's because Jesus will say, like, before Abraham was, I am. So he's like, before Plato was, there was Jesus. And that's where Plato got this idea from. Now, where did Plato get that idea from? I think he knew the Old Testament. Maybe not all of it, but I have no reason to doubt that the Bible has always pretty much been kind of universal. And why wouldn't he have access to the finest literature that the world has ever produced?
Yeah, makes sense. What are his dates? He's late BC, isn't he? I'm just thinking about the conquest of Israel and Judea, and the distribution of texts. And I like regularly am struck by my own misperception of just how big the world is. It's so big right now, but it was very small at the time, like, and these people were known. Daniel was known. Cyrus, we just went over Cyrus yesterday in Bible class. Cyrus, how is it that he comes to believe that he is to send the people back to Judea, back to rebuild Jerusalem? Well, Isaiah said it. So it's like, imagine 150 years earlier, Isaiah has got this prophecy that names him, that calls him by name, and he's got people in his kingdom who know that prophecy, and then he shows up and his name is Cyrus, and somebody's going to say to him, did you realize that there's this book that talks about you? That'd be great if you're a Persian king, right? How awesome would that be to find out that the nation you conquered had talked about you beforehand? Of course this stuff is circulating.
Yeah, I mean, that lines up really well with Gideon's story. Like, he goes down to the camp and he hears the people, hey, I had a dream about this guy named Gideon, right?
Yep.
So this is what I love about Luke's Maundy, Thursday account, which we've got on Thursday. It's really simple. Jesus is like, Peter and John, you go to the village and you're going to find a man with a jug. And then he's going to take you to a room to the master of the feast, and you're going to ask for a place. He's going to give you an upper room. And then Luke's like, and that's just how it happened. So this is prophecy, right? It's like Jesus tells us what's going to happen, and then it happens, and we're surprised by it. And fair enough. Somebody tells me a guy's going to come back from the dead. Okay, let me see it first. But then we do, and then we still don't believe. Now I don't want to forget this. So you asked the dates of Plato. So here's what I'm struck by: Babylonian captivity, 586, 587. We still have prophets in exile. Malachi being the last one. He stops prophesying in 430. So that's 150 years into exile. 430 BC, Socrates, I believe, is killed. Is it 400 or 399, somewhere around there? So what you have is you have the prophets stop speaking, and then like almost immediately you've got Socrates, Plato, and then Aristotle. So it's almost as if they take over the great conversation. And it is a great period of silence because God's not speaking. So it's like without God, this is the farthest that we can get. But then what's going to happen is God is going to use those terms later on after they're dead to advance his kingdom. Because if you don't have the Greeks, then you don't get the Council of Nicaea, right? So what we're able to do is we're able to plunder the Egyptians and use their terms to a certain extent to help explain Christianity. And that's God saying, man, my son is the Logos. So you guys were talking about him, even though you didn't know you were talking about him. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's Paul's apologetic, right? On Mars Hill, the Areopagus, right? So this altar to an unknown God, he recognizes something of what they're saying as having. I mean, that's great. That's great too, because it's kind of it feels a bit deficient to say, oh, look at what they had discovered all on their own. And Paul's apologetic is, you got so close all by your own effort. Isn't it much better to be like, you didn't even realize the heritage that you were possessing, that you possessed here, and let me tell you where this came from and where it's going. Yeah.
Right. It's like we all have this built in. I mean, it's almost as if God made us, right? There's this innate sense, there's this natural knowledge, and then Christianity is the great key. Chesterton's so good on this. He's like, the world is so symmetrical except where it's not. And it's the same thing with Christianity. He's like, you start looking at the human body and you're like, man, you got an eye on both sides. Okay, great. You got an ear on both sides, two nostrils. So you rip open the chest and you're expecting it to be symmetrical. So you see a heart on the left and you're like, man, I see where this is going. There's going to be a heart on the right. Nope. There's not. So it's the same thing with Christianity. So it makes all the sense in the world. So it's very normal, except in some places it's very weird. But what happens is it lines up exactly in the places you'd want it to line up. So it's symmetrical in the right places and it's asymmetrical in the exact right places too.
Yeah. Yeah, which is I mean that fits with thinking about Paul's words on wisdom or Solomon, in Proverbs. There is like this sensibility. Pursue sense and insight and wisdom with all your might, because being disordered as a human means being irrational, like not attending to the symmetries, right? That's what the demons do. That's what evil does, is it disorders things that are meant to be ordered, or it puts out of balance things that are symmetrical. At the same time, there are these features of creation that force you to acknowledge that God, who created them, knows better than you, because you and I would have made everything symmetric, and God's like, nope, because my thoughts are higher than your thoughts, and my ways than your ways, right?
Yeah. I prefer the word illogical, because then you can get in the logos there. So this is where it's like you got two things that have to be true. Like God is logical, but he's also passionate. And it's not like, this is where I don't really like the word balance, because it makes it sound like it's 50-50. I think the Christological union is more helpful, because it's like, man, it's full tilt both ways. It's 100% of each.
That's good. So does that fit then with the value or the reason perhaps that we have four gospels? Because when we, it's feasible for God, being God, to be full tilt us and pathos, right? He can this is, I'm not going to articulate this very well, but like he is capable of things that we are incapable of. And so you need this diversity, or this asymmetry. So for instance, God begets his son, whereas we need a man and a woman to beget a child, right? The Father begets the Son of himself, and he creates humanity so that you can't do it on your own. He gives us the Word incarnate. Jesus is all in all, and yet it's conveyed to us through the mouths of 4 different gospel writers, because who can, were I to keep on writing all the things that Jesus did, not all the books in the world could contain it. Neither could all of the words accurately capture it, right? There's a sense in which you need these different angles in order to give you the full picture.
And so you need the 4 gospels, so it's a 4D thing, you could say. You ever been to a 4D movie theater?
No, I have not. Oh, is that where you can smell stuff and you get sprayed water on you? Yeah.
Yep. So you hate it, don't you? I can just tell.
I hate experiences.
Just don't buy me a vacation. Just give me money, Mom. But so it's like this 4D thing. It's like we're 3-dimensional creatures, but then there's this other thing here. So we need all 4, and beyond that, we need additional preachers too, right? Like it's inexhaustible, because this. It's like, man, I preached on that last year. What am I going to say? Well, if you would just open up the Bible and read it, it's like, wow, there's 10 sermons here that I'm just seeing right now. And so this is why I like listening to brother preachers, their sermons, because we could both have really, really good sermons and yet preach a completely different thing, and that doesn't make it wrong. So it's the same thing with the 4 gospels too. Yeah,
that's good. It's also humbling, because it's kind of like, you and I can go away, and there will be another preacher who, right? And actually, you can know the gospel with any one of these gospel accounts. So you could have the gospel with Mark all on its own.
Right. Yeah. Now you don't get certain creedal elements with Mark. So it is assumed that eventually they will be a package deal, because like you said, you don't get the virgin birth. You don't get maybe the resurrection, maybe the ascension. I mean, it kind of depends on how you read it, right? Mark certainly knows about the resurrection, but you read it, it's very surreal at the end. They run away, they're scared. You don't see the resurrected body. So God is going to package all of these things together, and then we're going to, so all of philosophy is footnotes to Plato. But it's really all conversation is just a footnote to the Bible and the 4 gospels.
Yeah. Huh. Do you think that, so I'm just trying to think about how to make sense of that statement, which is true, to Christians who don't have the luxury that you and I do of reading the Bible all the time, or the compulsion to think about just about everything in terms of the Bible, right? So our main occupation is applying the Bible to individuals and to congregation, right? That's what we do. And so to say every conversation is a footnote to the Bible makes sense, because we're accustomed to thinking that way. How do you translate that, or how do you convey that to people who don't have that luxury? How do you make that accessible to them?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah, right.
That's what we're aiming to do with preaching, right? Is to make it accessible to them. So acknowledging that the words that I speak, like God gave me this mouth, He also gave them those ears, right? So the God who gave you your ears, does He not hear? Like the Psalms will say. Oh, the best analogy for this, I mean, it's the parable of the sower. It's just I'm just gonna cast some seed, and I like that. That's very helpful, and maybe we overuse it, but maybe we don't, because people will say, "Well, I'm just casting seeds here and there," and sometimes we kind of cringe when we hear that, right? Because people are like, "I was just talking to this person at Walmart and I casted a seed," but maybe I'm so cynical that why do I cringe when people say that? Why can't I just be like, "Man, good for you"? Now the quality of the seed matters. Are you getting it from Monsanto or, from Matthew's seedery?
And that was the last podcast episode they ever produced.
That's right. Yeah. I didn't even think about the seed conglomerates. I apologize. Hey, if you want to sponsor us, we won't say anything. Get in contact with our people.
Okay.
Yeah, so
all right.
Do you have any thoughts on that? Like how to take this thing that we study professionally?
I think that maybe one thing it would be, it's related to this notion of casting seeds. So one of the reasons why I think we cringe is because we know how much instruction there is to do, right? So like, how do you get somebody from you don't know anything about the gospel to I'm going to share something with you, and then picture down the road, here's a full-fledged Christian member of the congregation getting their kids baptized and so on. And like the move there is pretty long. That's a pretty long path. It seems, at least in terms of just how much stuff you've got to learn. And so I think the temptation is to think about work that we must do in drawing people all that way, as opposed to recognizing that God hasn't given everyone to do everything, right? I planted, Apollos watered, God gave the growth, right? So that I think would be that's the bit of wisdom that I think I've had occasion to share or to reflect on and share more recently, and that is you don't have to do everything all at once, but you should do something. And so you don't have to know all of the Bible all at once. Make it a goal to know the Bible from beginning to end. What a great goal. I mean, and what Christian wouldn't want to be able to say, I know the Bible, I know all the stories, and I know where to find things, and so I've got all of this in the back of my head ready to go at any time. Great. That's the goal. But you don't do all of that all at once. And so given that fact, don't let that keep you from doing something and doing it thoroughly. So that's one of the reasons why I like Mark is like, at what point would reading Mark over and over again begin to be useless? And I don't know how many times you'd have to read it before you stopped gaining something from reading it. And there's some value, like the point at which you're like, okay, I've heard, I'm ready for something new. Well, then you got 3 more gospels to choose from, right?
Well, so here's the thing. It's like you actually can't fully know the Gospel of Mark until you know the other 3 gospels as well.
Sure. Right.
Because then you start to see the uniqueness of his account. So one of my favorite story arcs in the Bible is Mark's. And so I'm fully convinced, he's the rich young man who runs up to Jesus. And, the giveaway is Mark's the only one who includes the detail, because Matthew and Luke also have the rich young man, but Mark's account says Jesus looked at him and loved him. And that's just a passionate detail where, like, David, can you try to give me the look right now? Let's see it.
That's the only look I have on my face when I'm talking to you. It's you've never seen another look.
Okay. Well, I haven't felt it, but fine.
That's all right.
But like, it's one of those things where it's like you know the look, but it's like you can't put it into words, right? So what does that actually look like that Jesus looked at him and loved him? Well, the guy who saw it certainly knew it, and he wrote it down.
Okay, so this is great because this is one of the things that I was thinking about as I was comparing the different passion accounts, and it seems to me that while you're right, Mark has that detail about himself, I think, and they're in the garden, a man naked except for this linen garment, and then he runs away naked. So Mark can describe some details from his own firsthand experience, and he could probably also give us Peter, he wept bitterly, or what it was like to, get behind me, Satan. I mean, Mark chapter 8 is that's a potent chapter. But Luke gives us those kinds of details from a number of characters. And so I was thinking that one of the things that really stands out in the Passion account in Luke is his collection of eyewitness testimony. He's like, he talked to a lot of people who told him what it was like to witness these things.
Right. And what's really useful about Luke is, if we're going to study church history, it's always in conjunction with the book of Acts. So, for example, Luke, when writing the Garden of Gethsemane scene, includes a small detail that Jesus went to pray about a stone's throw away, which is such a why did he write it as a stone's throw? Like, who, very intentional. And then you think about, okay, Stephen's story about the stoning of Stephen in early church history, and how well Stephen's story and Jesus' story line up, right? Because they're both praying, and they both, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit, which is a Lucan thing. Man, that's beautiful, and that's moving. So yeah, Luke is very intriguing for that element as well.
Yeah, that's right. So if you were gonna give other notes on comparing and contrasting the Passion accounts. How else would you? What would you say is unique about Matthew? How would you set Matthew apart from the rest?
At the crucifixion, all the tombs were opened.
Yeah,
That is
that's good.
wild. And Matthew's the only one who includes that, and it says they ran to the holy city, um, which, you know, there's kind of a little bit of a debate about that. Is that Jerusalem, or is that heaven itself? Like, are they translated into heaven, like Enoch or like Elijah? Because what happens to these guys after they're raised from the dead?
Right. Same question with Lazarus. It's like here's a guy who's raised from the dead. What is his life like henceforth?
Yeah, right. Well, we know from the Palm Sunday account in John 12 that everybody gathered around because he raised Lazarus from the dead, and then they wanted to kill him. So he's like, guys, come on, guys, I just died. Can you give me?
What is it? Where there's something appointed for man to die once, right? Who says that? Yeah, Hebrews 9. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes the judgment. I wonder about these guys who already died once. Did they met their quota?
So I hear tearing your ACL is worse the second time.
Yeah. Huh.
So, but it really raises questions about the intermediate state, of course. All of these things, because if they come back from the dead and then they're there, right? What's that like? I'm thinking about Samuel, who was just irate that Saul would wake him up.
Yeah. Although there's some question there as to whether that's actually Samuel or an imposter.
I know. I think the plain reading of the text though is like it's pretty plainly it's Samuel, but we can make allowance for that.
I think it's notable that the witch, whatever this experience is a unique experience. This thing has never happened to her before, and presumably you don't succeed as a witch without ever being able to conjure some sort of a spiritual, activity. And so this one's different, right? If she was talking with demons before, who have an interest in making themselves kind of agreeable and not too frightening to the people who are conjuring them, Samuel was terrifying to her.
Right. And based on his, now, of course, looks can be deceiving, but Saul's like, what does he look like? And it's like this. Somebody's like, hey, I know a Missouri Synod pastor. I'm like, oh, like who is he? And they don't know his name, but he's like, well, he's white, he's kind of chubby, he's got glasses and a beard.
Oh yeah, that guy. I know that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. But there was some defining characteristic in that characteristic of Samuel that Saul's like, that's the guy. So also in Matthew's account, it's these earthquakes because so you get the earthquake that opens up the tombs, right? And then the earthquake, of course, tears the curtain in two. But also at the resurrection, there's an earthquake, which is unique to Matthew. So what that does is you wonder, is it the same earthquake? Like obviously they're 3 days apart, but I mean they're connected by this geographical thing. So we're never meant to, of course, disconnect the crucifixion with the resurrection. And then also in the resurrection of Matthew, he mentions the angel coming down like lightning from heaven, which is a uniquely Matthean thing.
Yeah. Those are all interesting details. I hadn't really thought about that before. And what explanation could you give for that? I mean, so why does Matthew notice these things? Could just be it's what stood out to him, what he's attentive to.
Yeah, where did I? Oh, okay. So I've got a note here that I made. Matthew 24:27. Oh, yes. So this is probably where David and I were talking about this, 2 years ago about the eschatology, the end times in the Gospels. But I mean, look, so this word lightning doesn't appear all the time, but in Matthew 24:27, Jesus is talking about, the abomination of desolation, the end times, and for as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. So there's this line of thinking then, hey, this is the coming of the Son of Man, which I really like. Now, I don't think there's just one, right? Just like one of my favorite Easter hymns, you could say, crown him with many crowns, right? There's many crowns, there's many comings. Like he's coronated on the cross with the crown of thorns. He's coronated again, like he defeats death. So yeah, he's going to be the king. And then he ascends into heaven where he's coronated, and Stephen sees that. So it's like during his passion and every single moment after that, and certainly when he comes back again, that's also going to be his coronation. So we just keep stacking this guy with crowns. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm thinking about how he says to the chief priests, right? You'll see the Son of Man, you'll see the Son of Man coming in glory, right? So, which is, he's lifted up on the cross, right? So they saw it, they witnessed it, right? A coronation with the crown of thorns on his head, that's good. This happens. I mean, this is. I always talk about the presidential politics or the presidential process, right? So you are elected, the vote is certified, and then you are inaugurated, right? But in monarchies, you'd have all kinds of ceremony. You'd have all kinds of authorities involved along the way too. You need all kinds of people to recognize you, right? You need the church to recognize you. You need your family to recognize you. You need the nobility to recognize you, right? And this is what Jesus is essentially doing. He's lording it over all of the people under whom, over whom he has authority. Yeah.
Right. And then eventually what's going to happen is every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. Right. That's going to be the culmination of it. So my question for you analogically then is, during Jesus's ministry, who was the one who didn't want to certify the election?
Yeah, I mean, so how about those who spread the rumor afterwards that the disciples came and stole the body, right? It was fraud.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Yep. That's good.
Which, do you know, I should look this up, but is that what they still say today? Is that the prevailing description of like why the Gospels exist among the Jews? Is it was a lie, they stole the body? Because they needed an explanation for the empty tomb, right? Because there's witness to that. But
Yeah, well, there's a whole bunch of moves, because so if you say that what you're giving away is that there was a real historical person named Jesus of Nazareth. And honest historians would say that, but this, like there's a real question that historians have: was there ever a guy named Jesus?
Such a dumb question.
which is crazy. It's like we don't doubt that there was a guy named Alexander the Great or Homer,
right,
or like all guys who predated Christ, right? We don't doubt that there was a historical King David, right? And we've got 4 Gospels, we've got 2 books, and of course we got Psalms written by King David, but I mean those could be forgeries, like using their reasoning. But like, yeah, that's so to answer your question, I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me if they still, some people still said that.
Yeah, I mean it's remarkable. I remember reading a sermon by Erdmann Neumeister, the hymn writer. Yeah. What are the hymns? I know my faith is founded on Jesus Christ, my God alone. There's a couple other ones that are just great Lutheran hymns. And I remember reading this sermon, and it was at a time when I was thinking about the Bible as, the authority of the Bible quite a bit. And this really stuck with me. He goes, we do not subject to the same scrutiny any other text the way that we are inclined to subject the Bible to scrutiny. And he compared it to it's like here you are inspecting the sun to see if it's actually giving off light while you're lighting candles all around and just letting them illuminate things. It's like obviously the bright sun.
And that's really helpful, because what happens if you stare at the sun?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you have to look away.
Yeah, so instead of judging the sun, like you let the sun give its light. This is what James says. It's like, you guys, rather than even breaking the law, you guys become judges of the law yourselves, putting yourselves above the very law.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So you could think that then I'm thinking back to when you were talking about Plato, and is John borrowing, or is he co-opting, or is he saying we are the ones who know about the Logos? Um, the presuppositionalist apologetic that says, by what standard, is really helpful. And so, does Plato ever bother to ask the question, where did my reason and all my senses come from? My capacity to ask these questions about the first things, did that, where did that come from? Or is that not reflective of something original, something greater? Yeah.
Well, so the very little I know about Plato, by the way, we could start a series because he's really
Yeah.
enjoyable to read, but talking about his forms and shadows. So like everything that we see is based on an even greater reality. And Paul will use that kind of language too. It's like everything we have on earth is modeled after God, right, including our family. So like I think he's definitely onto something. Of course, we're going to disagree with other things, but yeah, I would sense that he's got this idea, at least, that there is some kind of thing out there that is giving him this life. Of course, he doesn't say it's Jesus, but or Yahweh or whatever.
Right. I mean more though that like your capacity to make judgments about things is also something that is given to you, and so you cannot, by definition, use that to judge the thing that gave you that faculty. Right? It's just like you can't do it.
Well, that's because he's common sense. He's not struggling with the epistemological question of how can I know everything. He's like I can see things because I got eyeballs, and he's not like let me pull out my eyeballs so I can see how I see things.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So yeah, so this is where classical philosophy always started in wonder, which is like a childlike thing. It's like I'm here. This is amazing. Let's figure this out. He's not nihilistic and is like he doesn't ask, what why am I asking why am I here? Or something like it's always beginning in wonder,
Yeah.
which is
Sure.
cool. You see this with your kids too, right? It's like it's so refreshing seeing a kid wake up in the morning and it's like the greatest day that's ever existed. Or get
I feel that when I
yeah,
see my kids running anywhere, wherever they want to go, wherever they're trying to get to, they can't get there fast enough because it's just wonderful.
that's yep. And then they trip and they fall, but then they get up and oh, it's
It doesn't slow them down. It wasn't. That's great. That's fantastic. Yeah. Yeah.
oh, good. Hey, well, tell you what, this has been so I told you I thought this might take the hour talking about all four gospels. We've essentially talked about one, maybe two.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and so what we should do is we should give it its true justice and talk about Mark, Luke, and John next time. I wasn't planning on taking 2 hours on this, but this is my favorite thing to do is talk about the gospels because this is where the very words of Jesus, life and salvation is found. So I think it's well worth my time.
Yeah, that'll be good. And then a little more notice. I can do a little more prep work on it. Make sure I know my tetramorph properly. So
And I enjoy, for the record, I don't tell David all the time what we're going to talk about, and it's enjoyable for me because I just like seeing the wheels spin.
it's good times. It's good times. All right, I'm gonna hit stop.